Welcome. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to make a mobile application using Flash. Now this is an example of the project that we're going to create, and it's been set up so that we have 4 buttons. The home page is the portfolio page. This will go to a page for gallery, another page for resume, and another page for contact. So we're going to look at how to create this and set up the navigation so that we can go from one page or screen to another. And this is all developed using Flash. And with Flash we can export this out as an app for iPhone as well as for Android. So I'm going to start by opening up Flash. Okay, and this is my finished version of the example of what you just saw, and we're going to be setting up our timeline, and I'll just go through here and you can see what this looks like, and then we're going to build one. We have the background, which has the grid. We have the bar, which is at the bottom. You make this a little smaller. All right, so we have this black bar across the bottom, our buttons, the white area up at the top, our content, which will be for each of the names so that we know that our navigation's worked, and our labels don't show on the screen, but we'll be able to use these for our navigation. And then we have a layer for actions, which has the code in there that's going to handle our navigation. So to start a new project, I'm going to go to File and New from the menu in Flash, and I'm going to choose the General tab, and you could choose Air for Android or Air for iOS. I'm going to choose Air for Android, and they are slightly different in their screen sizes over here, but when you create for one, you can create another project and extend it and revise the width and sizes to have it automatically size for the new dimensions. Okay, so then I'm going to click OK, and I have my new screen here set up, and with the timeline that we always have when we start a new Flash project. So layer 1 and a blank keyframe. So since I've already set up all of my buttons and have all of my elements in my library from here, I'm just going to be pulling them in from this into the new project, because our real goal here is to look at how to set up the navigation and not design the buttons and the backgrounds. So I'm going to change in my library tab over here, I'm going to change to the portfolio Flash file that I just had open that has all of my elements in here. And so I'm going to rename this layer to background. So I'm just going to call it BG for short. And I'm going to drag the grid for the background over on here. Okay, and I can quickly just line this up with my stage by clicking on the Align tool, and I can make sure Align to Stage is checked off, and I can say Align Left Edge, and then either top or bottom edge, and now it's set correctly in there. So I have my background sized exactly to the properties of 480 by 800. So that's my background layer. I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to put the bar, my navigation bar for the bottom, in on this. So say bottom bar. And again, I'm going to switch back to my library, and I already have bar set up in here, so I'm just going to drag that movie clip symbol over and place this on the stage. So this was just a rectangle that had bevel and emboss added to it. I'll add another layer here for my buttons, and I'm going to drag out the buttons onto that layer. So I'm going to make sure that's selected, and I'm just going to drag contact out, my gallery button out, home, and resume. Right, so I'm just going to drag these into the general area that I want and in the order that I want them to appear. And I can select each of these and make them one big group. And again, I'm going to go to my Align tool, and I'm going to tell it not to align to stage. Well, I'll show you what happens when I do align to stage. If I say space evenly horizontally, it's going to extend them out to the edges of the stage. So not quite what I wanted. I'm going to undo that, Command Z, and I'm going to take off the align to stage. And now this time when I choose space evenly horizontally, it's going to keep the outside ones where they are and arrange everything else with an even amount of spacing in between. Let me just, it kind of looks like they are already. So let me move these closer together and then select them and show you what happens when we align that way. So I'm going to space evenly horizontally, and so now these are all spaced equally apart between the outer two that were selected. And before I go much further, I'm going to save this, put this on my desktop and call it Portfolio Android. Now my bar down here did extend a little bit past the edge, and the only way to really tell is, well, I can hide that and show it. So I'm not really sure, maybe here I can see how low my buttons are actually going to be. I'm going to turn on my grid lines and let that help me to visualize on the screen here where things are laid out. And in order to, well, they're not grid lines, these are my guides. So I want to show the guides, and you can see that it's already turned on, but I don't see any guides. So I have to turn on my rulers first. Then once I have my ruler, I can click this and drag it out. And again, since I can't really see, I could show and hide my bar, but I want to place this at exactly 800 pixels down here. So I could use this as a guide, my ruler, but I can also double click on the guide and I get a little guide pop-up. And it's close to 800, but I want to make sure it's exactly 800, so it's right on that edge. So that lines it up right there. Same thing for horizontal or for vertical. I can drag out a guideline there. And again, I'm just going to double click on it, and I want it to be at exactly 0. So now it lines up perfectly there. And I'll drag the other one out, and this one should be exactly 480. And I'll drag one out from the top, and this one should be at exactly 0. So now if any of my stuff spills over outside the edge, I can see the guides and where they line up. So I think I do want to move my buttons up just a little bit. So I'm just going to select that keyframe, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge them up. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, next I'm going to start to set up the top part. So I had a white bar up here, so I'm just going to add another layer, name it white bar, and I'm going to drag that over from the other file, and it was just called white. And I'm going to line this up towards the top. Now in the example in the preview that I showed you, it wasn't this solid white bar going across the top. I did add some filters to it, so I'm going to show you what I did with that. I'm just going to select it. Now in order to add filters, it has to be either a button or a movie clip symbol. So this has been set up as a movie clip. So I'm going to go into properties, and you can see here I've got my filters. I'm going to add a filter, and it kind of goes off screen here, but I'm going to do the blur filter, and I'm going to increase the blur. And I'm also going to change the color effect. I'm going to change the alpha to bring it down a little bit so that the edges aren't so solid. Next, we have some text that's going to be the content. So I'm going to add a new layer above this, and this is going to be my content layer. And for the first one, I have one called Portfolio, or it's actually the home movie clip, and you can see it's the text with the word portfolio on it. So I'm just going to drag that onto stage. Okay, so I have the main layout set up here, and I'm just going to zoom this out just a little bit so that you can see the whole thing. Okay, now the next thing is, what we want to do is set it up so that when home is tapped, it comes back to frame 1. When gallery is tapped, we're going to have it go to another keyframe. When resume is tapped, it's going to go to another keyframe. And when contact is tapped, it's going to go to another keyframe. So what I'm going to do is start to set up another layer called labels. I'm going to add another layer above this and I'm going to name it labels. I'm going to spread this out about every 10 keyframes so that we have some space in here to be able to see the name of our label. Now we can label these frames so that we can identify them visually for seeing them on the screen. Let me go back to my original one and show you here. Right? These are the labels for the frames. So frame 1 has the label home. Frame 10 has the label gallery, and so forth. And so you can see the little red flag there. So visually, I can look at this and know right away that this keyframe is going to be holding the content for the resume, and that this keyframe is going to hold the content for contact. So we can create frame labels so that we can see them, and the reason why I have the space in here is because if we don't have space, then you'll just see little red flags and you won't be able to see the name of the label. So if I come in here to my first keyframe for labels, and I'll show you what that does. I go to the Properties tab and I'm going to call this Home, and I'm just going to tap Enter, and you can see here that it has added a red flag, but we can't see the words. And so that's why we expand the timeline so that we have some space in here. So I'm going to add another keyframe on frame 10. So I'm going to do Insert Keyframe, and now you can see this shows up. So keyframe 10, and then we'll spread it out every 10 frames so that we have a little space in between to work with. So we should have one for home and we'll have one for gallery. So we'll name this one gallery. We're going to name frame 20 to be resume and 30 for contact. And I don't want this keyframe here, so I'm going to right click on it and choose remove frame. Okay, so now you can see frame 1 has our contact for portfolio on it, but then when we go past it, everything blanks out. And that's because all of our content right now is on frame 1. So what we want to do is, for content, I'm going to come in under each one of these other keyframes, and I'm going to insert a keyframe here as well. So insert keyframe, and it's going to duplicate. It's going to take the content that was in keyframe 1 for the content layer, and it puts it in keyframe 10. And it's going to say portfolio because that's what was on this keyframe, but we'll change that in a second. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to right click on frame 20 and insert keyframe, and frame 30 insert keyframe, and then my last frame here I'm just going to insert frame. Right? We don't need another keyframe there, just another frame. So that expands our content, so we have portfolio in each one of these. So let's update this to match the names that are on the labels. So if I go to the gallery content frame, let's say I need to have these in my library to start out with. So let me go over to my library, and I'm going to switch back to the other FLA file that I have open, and I'm going to drag these all in at the same time. So I'm going to drag in my contact movie clip, I'm going to drag in my resume movie clip, and I'm going to drag in the gallery movie clip. Right now, by doing this, I put all of these movie clips onto this keyframe, which isn't really what I wanted to do. But by doing that, what I did was, now these have been made a part of my library for my Android application. So you can see here's gallery movie clip. So I can delete these off of the stage now, but they stay in my library. So what I want to do, I want to swap this portfolio with the gallery movie clip that I have. So I'm just going to select it, and then in the Properties panel, I'm going to go over and choose Swap, and then I can find the gallery movie clip and make sure that's what I want, and I'll click OK. And what this does is it keeps everything positioned in the same place. So there's not a lot of movement or shifting around, so that we get a nice smooth change or transition. Again, for example, here you can see where portfolio is set up. And then when we go to gallery, it just kind of swaps position here. It's not moving up or down or left and right. So just the text is changing. So that's an important concept, because if I were to come in here and move this down a little bit and move it into the left, then what you have happening when you're clicking and going is, see how it's moving, right? Not a very smooth transition. So even though the text is changing, we still want to keep things positioned in the same location. So I'm just going to undo that so that it's back to the same place again. Okay, so gallery is set up. I can come over here and I can do the same thing for resume. I can swap it out for the other image of the resume movie clip, and then repeat that for contact. Right, so now if you can see how these will look when the user is going to be clicking a button and they click and they go to gallery, they're going to go to resume, and they're going to go to contact. Okay, so in this timeline, we have the keyframes for our content. And we also want to extend the rest of this. We want the white bar to be on all of these other screens. We want the buttons to be there. We want the bottom navigation, and we also want our background. So to extend that, I'm just going to select these keyframes. Now remember, when you're selecting, don't click and then click and drag, because it does weird stuff to you, right? It thinks you're trying to move something. So Control Z or Command Z undoes that. So when you're going to select, you're just going to click and drag. So you want to make sure that it's not selected, and all in one swoop you're going to click and drag all at once, right, to select these. Now we want to insert frames. I'm just going to right click and choose Insert Frame. And now all of our buttons and the bottom navigation bar area have been expanded out to cover all of the keyframes. So now when we scroll and we go across, you can see the only thing that's changing is our content frame. Right? We're just doing a basic example here, but of course you can have much more content in any of these frames. You can also put other movie clips onto these frames. Okay, so the basic layout is now set up. So again, I'm going to save just to make sure that I don't lose anything. And so now I think we're ready to set up some navigation. So when we're getting ready to navigate, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more now with this onto these buttons. Right, what we want to have happen is when the home button is clicked, we want it to go to the frame called home. And when gallery is clicked, we want it to go to the frame called gallery. So makes sense so far. We have our labels and our content structured to match what we want our navigation to do. Now just to point out to you, even it just is coincidence that home is first and then gallery is second and resume is second or third. It doesn't have to be that way. These can certainly be in any order, and this can be in any order down here, because we're going to set up the action script so that when it's clicked, it's going to go to a specific frame. So it doesn't have to go in order down here. Now, in order to add action script to an element, each element, whether it's a movie clip or a button, has to have a unique instance name. So to name your instances, you select it. So I'm going to select my home button. And then in the properties panel, you can see over here, there's a little space for instance name. So I'm going to type in there, I'm going to call it home, and then I like to use BTN so that I can immediately reference that something is a button versus a movie clip. You don't have to do it that way. It just kind of makes it a little easier because you end up with a lot of things called home or a lot of things called gallery. So this is being specific, and I know that this is the home button that I'm referring to rather than the home movie clip. So I'm going to do the same thing for each of these buttons. I'm just going to name this gallery and BTN, and then resume button, and then contact BTN. Okay, now that these are named, we can use the code snippets. Code snippets is a really cool feature that's been added in recent versions of Flash. The code snippet is on the toolbar here, and if you don't have that or you can't find it on your screen, you can always go to Window on the menu and click Code Snippets, and that will bring it to the front. Now with code snippets, these are action script pieces of code that can be added to different elements and to do different things. So when you get a chance, I would recommend going in and, playing around and getting familiar with it. But we're looking for this to be in timeline navigation. All right, when you think about it, when we click a button, we want it to go someplace on the timeline. So that's a good place to start looking. So first of all, let's say we wanted to, when we click on the button, we want it to go to a frame and stop. We don't want it to go to a frame and play, because what would happen is, say we told it to go to gallery, and we say go to this frame and play. What's going to happen is it's going to get here and it's going to keep running until it gets to another frame that has a stop on it. So we want it to go to the frame that has our content and stop. So with my home button selected, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to double click on Go to Frame and Stop. And I'm going to collapse the code snippet button or panel in case it didn't collapse for you. And it opens up the Actions panel, and this is where the action script code goes. Now in here, this grayed out section, these are comments, and they're giving you some information in here on how to customize this particular piece of action script. So it says replace the number 5 in the code below with the frame number you want the playhead to move to. So let's just analyze this code a little bit so you have an understanding of what's going on. We have home BTN, right? So we just named this button home BTN. So you can see the correlation here between the two. And what this is doing is it's adding an event listener. In other words, once this frame loads, once frame 1 loads that has all of our buttons on there, Flash is going to be listening and waiting for a mouse event, which is a click. So it's going to be waiting and waiting and waiting until the home button is clicked. And when that occurs, it's going to do this function, right? And this was an automatically generated function that we just created by using the code snippet. So it's saying click to, go to, and stop at frame. So this is what they made up. And then you can see here it says function, and it uses the same name, and it's capturing a mouse event. And then what it's going to do is run what's inside the curly braces, which in our case is one line of code, which is go to and stop 5. 5 is the frame number. So that's going to go to and stop on frame 5, which isn't really what we want. We want it to go to and stop frame 1. So we could say 1. But since we named or labeled our frames, we can make this a little more user-friendly to us by saying, put in double quotes and say the name of the label of the frame we want it to go to. Now the value of using this over a number is, again, we can go through and easily identify where this is targeted so that we understand that the home button is going to go to the home frame. But later on, if you decide to expand this and maybe you're going to move things down and insert something else, and then all of a sudden contact is no longer frame 30, but it's at frame 60, then this, you don't have to remember to go in and change your code. So these comments that are in here, you can leave them in. I'm just going to take these out to kind of keep it a little less cluttered on my screen for this demonstration. So I'm going to repeat that process for gallery. Right, so I'm going to select gallery. Now this says action script code cannot be placed directly on objects, so I'm not worried about what this says right now. I'm going to come back into my code snippet, and I'm going to use the click to go to frame and stop snippet, and it adds this to the same frame. I forgot to point out to you, when we added the home in our actions, or in our timeline, it added another layer automatically called actions, and it added a keyframe in frame 1. Let me move this over. There's a little A for action script, and that's where the code is. So the code that we just added for the home button is on frame 1 with our home button. We just added this to the gallery. The gallery is also in frame 1, so it added this code to it. And this is the same code as before, right? It has the instructions and it tells you to replace the number 5 with the frame you want to go to. So I'm going to just delete that. And again, you can see this is gallery BTN, so the name of our gallery button. And it has an event listener waiting for a mouse click. Now this method is slightly different, right? Methods have to be unique. We can't have two methods with the same name. So you can see here, this is click to go to and stop at frame. And this one is click to go to and stop at frame 2. So the method names have to be a little different. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So if you were to just copy and paste this, you'd have to remember to give it a different name in here. But basically, it's doing the same thing. It's going to a certain frame and stopping. And in this case, we wanted to go to the gallery frame. Okay, and then resume, same thing. I'm going to make sure, since I moved off of that, I want to make sure I'm still on frame 1 of the resume. I'm going to add a code snippet, click to go to frame and stop. And then while I'm here, I might as well go in and select the contact button, click and go to frame and stop. Right, so all of these actions are now in frame 1 of my actions layer. And so now I just need to customize this a little bit. And again, I'm just going to remove these comments in here. It's okay for you to leave them in, but it's just going to clean this up to make it easier for you to read. So resume, we wanted to go to the resume frame. And the last one, get rid of those comments. And the last one is contact button. So I wanted to go to the frame called contact. Okay, so the code is there and set up so that when we click each of these, it will go to the different frames. And I do want to point out that, right, these actions are on frame 1, which is where our buttons are located. It has to know that these buttons are here. We couldn't put these buttons on a later frame and have this action script expect to know that these buttons are named Home BTN and Gallery BTN. So this action script is on the same frame as the buttons intentionally so that it knows what these are talking about. So let's run this and see what happens. So I'm just going to do Control Test Movie in Air Debug Launcher for mobile. Okay, so now what we have is maybe not what we expected. It's just rolling through frame after frame after frame continuously. So I'm going to close this. I don't have any error messages, so there's no code errors, but this is more of a logic thing. Right? What happens is when you run a movie, it starts on frame 1 and it keeps going until it gets to the end. And by default, it comes back and it starts back at the beginning and plays again. So this is what was happening. It was looping and looping and looping. But what we want to do is, in order to let the user read the content of the first frame and then make a decision about what to click on and go to, we need to tell it to stop first. So we can also use our code snippets for that. So I'm going to make sure frame 1 is selected because this is where I want it to stop. I want it to stop on frame 1 when this loads. So I'm going to go to code snippets, and under timeline navigation, the first one is stop at this frame. So I'm just going to double click on it to add it, and you can see that it added it at the bottom of the code, and we have our comment here, stop at this frame. So now I can test this. Okay, so now it has stopped and we're on the home frame, and if I click gallery, we go to gallery, we go to the resume page, and we go to the contact page. So we have a fully working navigation for our mobile application. And as I said, in our timeline, we close the actions frame, and in our timeline, right, we have a layer here for content, and right now the content is just the title for each of our screens. So you can have more content in here, but this was just designed to be a basic example of how to set up the navigation to go from one screen to another. And we did that all by using code snippets.